Welcome to the Good for Others show, where we turn bold ideas into real impact. I'm your host, John Valencia, President and CEO of the Good for Others Foundation. Here's what I know. Talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. Across the country, employers are struggling to find skilled workers while millions remain underemployed. The gap doesn't close by accident. It closes through intentional leadership, smart systems, and equity-driven workforce strategies. On the show, we sit down with leaders building those systems, the innovators, transforming nonprofits, workforce development, and community impact. If you care about economic mobility, leadership, and sustainable change, you're in the right place. Today, I'm sitting down with a leader who has redefined what's possible in STEM education. Shara Fisler, founder and executive director of Ocean Discovery Institute. Based in City Heights, San Diego, Ocean Discovery Institute is a nationally recognized nonprofit that Shara founded in 1999. What started as a bold vision has grown into a long-term, equity-centered STEM education pipeline, serving students from historically underrepresented communities, starting in elementary school and continuing through college and into STEM careers. Her results are extraordinary. 100% high school graduation, 100% college acceptance, and over 90% persistence in STEM majors. In a country where fewer than 30% of low-income students complete a bachelor's degree within 6 years, Shara hasn't just talked about equity and opportunity. She's built a proven system that delivers measurable, life-changing outcomes. Shara, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
So good. Thank you so much, Sean.
Awesome. So before we dive into the strategy and all the fun stuff that we're going to talk about today, I'd love for our audience to get to know you a little bit better. And with that, we have a fun few this or that questions. Are you ready?
Vit.
Okay. Beach day or hike in the woods?
I'm going to go beach day, but it's kind of both.
I love that. Podcast or playlist while driving?
Oh, you're killing me. I'm going to go playlist while driving.
Use only a flip phone forever or never use an emoji ever again?
I'm going to have to go never use an emoji ever again.
Text or phone call?
Phone call. It's my old schoolness. Yes.
I love that. Me too. Spicy salsa or mild guac?
Spicy salsa.
What's one app you refuse to delete?
Spotify.
And if you weren't leading Ocean Discovery Institute right now, what would you be doing?
I always thought maybe I would be like a Doctors Without Borders person.
I
But
love
this is
that
my
so much.
calling. So I'm
Yeah.
like,
You're doing what you're supposed to do.
I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But if there's anything
Awesome.
else, maybe that.
And on a more serious note, who or what inspires you?
I'm going to say our student graduates.
Right? Isn't that amazing? Those days of graduation mean the most, huh? I love that. Well, now that we've warmed up a bit, let's rewind the clock and let's think about what drew you into science education and youth development in general.
Great question. So my origin story.
Yeah.
Well, I was actually, I had gone to work after college. I actually was an environmental science major in college. And then after college, I got a position in Haiti, actually, and was working for a hospital doing agricultural work. And so really working in their community development division doing agricultural work. And then ended up really becoming interested in food production and seeing really the intersection of just, human experience and human need and seeing how that comes together with environment. And I think that's where my really strong interest in equity and really understanding how the environment around us plays such a huge role in the human experience and vice versa. So then went and got my master's, and after my master's degree, I had a chance to work with young people through a program called Upward Bound. Are you familiar with Upward Bound?
Yeah. I
Okay,
love
so it's
Upper
a
Bound.
federally funded program, right, for
Yeah.
would-be first-generation college students. And there was a group of them, a program that was being facilitated here in San Diego, and they were looking for placements for young people to be in a science internship. And they knew I was doing some research that I was continuing in grad school. And they said, would you bring on board a couple of students in your research? And this is many, many years ago, like 27, 28 years ago.
We
And
don't have to
I
say that. Yeah.
yeah. And I said, "Oh, sure, that'd be great," because I thought, "Oh, I love kids," and I was, like, really, hungry, and they said, "We'll pay you $8 an hour," and I was like, "Yes, $8 an hour," right? So, I had the students come on board and do the research with me, and it was one of those life-changing experiences because basically what happened was when I had the opportunity to work with these young people and engage them in this research, I saw, number 1, how they could really contribute to the real research incredibly well, and also how it changed their own belief and their abilities and what they could become. Changed my life and changed my focus.
That's amazing. So then, okay, so you're doing that work, and then at some point you have some sort of epiphany that this new nonprofit should exist. And I always tell people, don't start a new nonprofit. We
Exactly.
have 13,000 in San Diego. We don't need any more. But back then, obviously, you found some sort of gap in need. And so do you remember where you were? Do you remember like this idea and like someone was like, I think I'm going to do this? Like, how did that work?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I think that you earlier were using the words like leaders with bold vision. And I was thinking to myself, gosh, at the time, I think I was maybe a leader with a bold action. And I think the bold vision has grown over time, right? Because, I was in my 20s and I didn't have the vision for all this would become or where we were headed or what it could be. But I did want to take action. And so I think that was a good place to start. And I had to really learn, right? I had to really learn where the needs were, like you said, and really how we could, how as an organization we could really fill that gap. I like what you said because I think that's really important. That we don't just
Mm-hmm.
need to do work to do work. We need to fill the needs, right?
Right, right.
So I started it actually as a summer camp, and it started as a summer camp, and then I started to get, people saying to me, "Oh my gosh, like there's nothing like this in the schools, in the schools in the neighborhoods that we're working in, which is, we were working in low income areas. So how do we continue to create and build and use what we had, which I think from very early on, what I did understand is that young people, need a spark that makes them want to learn more. So
Yes.
I think that is the action that we took was like, let's give that spark that makes young people want to learn more. And then over time, started to really understand both the gaps and the opportunities and build those together to create what we have now as an organization.
Well, I think it's interesting because we've had an interesting career path ourselves, and not until today are we officially meeting. But in I guess 2008, I took over running San Diego Oceans Foundation. And I was talking to someone yesterday about how excited I was to finally meet you and be on this show. And I thought realistically about my own career path and how I used to work. And I'll be truthfully honest, like I probably okay, first of all, I know now that we should have been besties many, many moons ago doing the work we were doing. But I will say my ego, my fill in the blank, my whatever it may have been was probably like saw you as more of competition
Uh,
than as a
mm,
collaborator or someone doing similar work that means that we care so much that we are mission aligned in doing the cool work that we should have just bolstered efforts and figured out what we were doing and do that better.
yeah,
I know
yeah,
there was some synergy we had, and but again, I don't think the weirdest thing that I never was like, why don't Shara and I know each other? And I laughed about that yesterday, being like, wow, yeah, yeah, I've grown up a lot. And to think about, right? So I think a lot of these nonprofits now, we have that mentality of like, this is competition, right? And I don't see that anymore. I think the competition that exists for your organization and others, right, are the streets, the world that we live in that is not supplying and educating folks to be prepared to do cool stuff and exciting things, right? Not career exploration like you're doing, not getting people excited about educational and climate issues and the things that really matter. And instead, right, I was like, how am I going to prepare for this fun little chat with her? And I was like, oh, I think I need to dial it in a moment and realize, like, actually, it's like part of the crux of a lot of the issues we have. Whereas what I'm trying to do now with Good for Others, right, is say, no, we have these crazy silos we've built up where it comes to funding and we come to, oh, I don't want you to know who my donors are. I don't want you to steal them away from me, right? And I had that aha moment where I was like, oh my gosh, I love this full circle. moment of saying, wow, like that was something, if I could go back in time to, 20 something year old me, I would be like, no, Shara and I should have been out having fun, getting to figure out what we were each doing and then stay in those mission aligned work. So we weren't doing mission creep and trying to do all those things that we see so many other organizations doing right now. So I guess I'm publicly saying hi and thank you and sorry. And also, right, like, but cool work. Like you were doing really cool stuff. Like we had a similar program and, you just took that and made it something really phenomenal. So I just want to say kudos to you. And I've been a big fan of everything you've been doing and just really excited to finally meet you and hear your story. And I think this founder story and your, how you've come to this is really inspiring. And I think you have it as the human is at the center of what you do. And I can already tell that in this quick 10 minutes that we've already been chatting that like that is who you are and that's pretty cool. So just props to you and awesome and weirdly and I'm sorry was thrown in there at the same time.
And and I don't think that you need to apologize. I love what you're talking about, and I value everything you've said. And, I would pair that with sometimes, and I mentioned, it's, when you said 2008, that was literally the year we decided on really our directionality as an organization. I always call it the who do we want to be when we grow up as an organization moment, right? And so we decided, really on the focus of our work and that we wanted to create transformative experiences and make sure young people can grow up with science. And we wanted to build the building that I'm sitting in right now, which is a phenomenal space that sets the expectations our young people deserve. And because of that, we had to put our head down, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we had
Yeah.
to like, I was working like, crazy hours, as we all know how we all do, but like it had to be head down a unidirectional focus on this, and that didn't allow for as much synergy and those things because it's just as much on me as it is on you that we weren't hanging out, right? But I really had to at that time do that, and then you probably also had some of that going on too,
Sure.
right, with your
Yeah.
organization. So
Yeah.
to me it's a both and. Yes, we need to
Yeah. I love
collaborate, we
that.
need to align, and we also need to honor when it's time to create that focus and do the work that we're here to do, right? And I think that we need to accept and give ourselves grace,
Yeah.
right? For both of
Yeah.
those moments in
For sure.
time and allow for that. Because I do think sometimes when we get in a zone of like we got to partner with everybody, we got to like, that is exhausting, right? And it's yes, alignment is key and like I love what you're talking about, not replicating, right, the same kind of work. And so it's like really finding the middle ground. And I think that's still a journey I'm on, honestly, John, is like, where is
Yeah.
it too
We all
much?
are.
Is it not enough? Right. It's like, it's still that journey. But I'm going to tell you something crazy. We have a deeper connection than this through San Diego Oceans Foundation because when I started the organization, San Diego Oceans Foundation was our fiscal sponsor before I was a nonprofit, before we were a nonprofit. Yeah.
Mind blown. How? What?
Way, way,
That's
way back. So forever ago, I started collaborating with a woman who worked there at the time. And we did a project together on wetlands restoration. And a lot of the old time board members who were there at the Oceans Foundation were really supportive of me and the work and the organization. And then for a year, played the role as a fiscal sponsor for
uh,
for what was then called Aquatic Adventures, because that was our old name. So
oh my
yeah,
gosh.
so it's
See
like
this?
there's
This is
we are connected.
I love it. It's kismet. We were supposed to be friends forever, and we're finally doing that
I
in
know. Not
2026.
too
I love
late.
that.
Not too
I
late.
love that. Oh my gosh. Okay, so good segue into my next question for you. So if you could go back in time to a
Huh?
younger version of you, which obviously, was you've only been doing this work for a couple of years, but what would you say to a younger version of you that you wish that you would have known? Because right now we have a bunch of graduates from our training program, right, who are so excited to get into this work. And they ask me that all the time, like, what would you have told yourself?
Such a great question and so hard, right? Because
So many things.
well,
Right?
there's
I would
so
say
many
so many.
things. There's so many
Yeah.
things, and also it's hard to learn without having the experience, right? Like, I
Right.
think the biggest thing probably was, I do think like what you said about learning from others. Like, I think that I'm an entrepreneur by nature. Like, it's who
Mm-hmm.
I am. I don't know if I could have thrived in a space that wasn't sort of my own, action and
Mm-hmm.
vision, right? In the way that I have here. And we all have different, very personality. types, right? But I do think that one thing that is really useful is like having models of the way things are done and models of the way of how people operate, that if I had more of that like in my work, right, that I could have maybe moved that faster through some of the learning curve, right? So just being, and not that I didn't have phenomenal board members and phenomenal supporters and things like that, but in the day-to-day work, right? When you are the person who starts something and you have no experience, you are the person who starts something and you have no experience,
Yeah, for
right?
sure. For
So I
sure.
think just,
Yeah.
if maybe like if I could have had a few years under my belt, working in like a great organization, that would have been incredibly useful for me.
Well, and I think what you were just saying is mentioning board members and staff and the people who've supported you along the way, right? Knowing where you were in the growth of yourself and your organization and having the right players, especially as board members, there to support you and learn and pivot when you need to, right? That all really matters because we evolve as humans and as organizations. And I always say, a nonprofit is only as strong as its board of directors, right? And that matters because that's the foundation. And so if they're aligned with you as the leader of the organization, then you have someone as a partner, right? For all those members to be able to help you with a collective vision of seeing where you're trying to go and understanding that it's not going to be easy. There's going to be struggles. And I think we live in a world where, sometimes taking bold action and being innovative can be scary, and it doesn't have the guaranteed probability of it working. And in a space where we are as nonprofit leaders, we have to be bold and we have to push and we have to be strategic, of course, but sometimes innovation can come with unfamiliar territory.
Mhm,
So how
mhm,
have you navigated
mhm.
that, right? As a leader going in with this idea and maybe hearing some resistance from maybe staff or board members who were like, "Oh, I don't know." I mean, building your building was probably a really big thing to do, or going off and doing other new programs. Like, how do you navigate that? Because I think that's one of the biggest questions we get from our graduates is like, "I don't know how." I'm like, "I know you'll experience it, but how do you what are some of your tools that you use to kind of navigate through some of that?"
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm like, I think, one of the things we say as an organization is like we show up, right? And we stay.
Mm,
We're here for the journey. And I guess I
mm.
think about that as also a young person in their career, right? As well. Like, I mean, it's a journey. And and it kind of brings back to the other question you talked about, or, a second ago is this idea of, what do I wish I would have known? Like, it's going to be okay if you persist, right? And it's not always going to be okay every minute. I mean, I've gone through some like terribly difficult times personally, professionally, right? We all do. But, staying the course and knowing what we want to achieve as an organization, knowing what I want to achieve as a human being, knowing that I have a community of support around me and to lean into that, knowing that I don't know everything, obviously, never will. Thank God for AI, ChatGPT, is making me know so much more these days.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to fix that environmental problem soon, I hope. But yes, but there's a lot of innovation there, right? We can lean on, which is amazing. And then just continually striving. Like I literally just was downstairs with my teammate right before this conversation, just like we were just talking about like 5 things that we wanna be working on, and we're like, "Okay, we can't do all these things this year, but we know this is the direction we're headed. This is what we'll tackle next year." And, like, just to be alongside people who have such a similar great desire just to seek exceptionalism and exceptionalism for the mission, right? And so I think constantly innovating, not ever, I mean, this is the least boring job you could ever have, right? I've done it for 26 years, and it's like it continues to be equally as challenging, equally as rewarding, right, with each year because you're always striving for the next phase of excellence.
How do you balance your work-life balance? How do you manage that? I think, that's a struggle for so much. We wear so many hats in these roles, especially being there for, founding this organization and doing this. You probably know every inside in and outs of everything that's going on. And so you have to really disconnect, right? To charge yourself. So how do you do that? How do you
Yeah.
force yourself to?
Well, it's so funny because I think one of the things, like, you talk about what I could tell others, but, like, there's also what young people tell not as young people, right? Which I think is amazing, and I think one of the things that I've learned, from, like, what I think is phenomenal is I don't think people do what my more generation has done, right? Which is the way that you thrive and strive is 80 hours a week, head down, right? Like, that's what you do, and that's what success looks like, and if you don't do that, like, you're not doing what you should, right? And I got to really work on even changing my language around that. That isn't what I do anymore, and nor should it be, right? Nor is it what I would ever want for my team. And so I think, one is just there's sort of two concepts I think about. One is that a board member taught me, and he said, yeah, I asked him years ago, and he said work-life balance is integration. And so literally behind me, you can see drawings my daughter did when she was here last time. And, she is embedded in this organization. My family, my friendships, my world is integrated. And I think that for me is a huge way to make sure you have work-life balance is not the idea of separation as much as integration, right? It should all be lifting each aspect up, right? My graduates, my alums are my coworkers, they're my friends, they're my family, they're my, you know, the babies, their babies are my babies, right?
Yeah, of course, of
So
course.
it's like there's so much of who we are and where we spend our time. So to
Uh,
integrate is really beautiful. I think the second thing is I've come up with this thing that I've really been focused on the last couple of years, which is the idea of constraint builds abundance. So you really have to practice constraint in order to have abundance. And I think it's hard for people because they think constraint is a negative word. But what
yeah,
I've seen is like, actually, no, it's like when you really figure out where you're going to practice constraint. So we can't just have endless priorities, endless, even we were just talking earlier about partnerships and alignment and collaboration. Like, again, yes, and right, there has to be a level of constraint for us to go deep because otherwise we can be friends with everybody and yet get nowhere, right? And so I really think about like I pick up my daughter 3 days a week from school. And, I leave work early, I leave here, and I go pick her up at 3 o'clock. And I'm committed to that, right? That's my constraint. And what's the abundance I get is this time with my child on the way home from school, right? And then you even have things that happen. Like I've said, all right, I want to spend an afternoon with her in nature once a week. That's one of my New Year's resolutions. So I'm like, okay, well, what are all the amazing things I get from that? Well, one is doing the things I want, being an intentional parent, right? Another one is that I get to self regulate in nature, which is not only good for me, but it's good for my team, right?
yes.
Because
Uh-huh.
a self regulated leader is a better leader. And then I went last a couple weeks ago, we met up with a friend from school and her mom, and I ended up finding out there's all these crazy connections where they can actually help Ocean Discovery Institute that like I didn't even know, nor would I have known if I hadn't gone on this walk in nature with this
Oh,
family, right? So
amazing.
that's the abundance we get when we say there's some constraints I'm going to put on this, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's really how integration and realizing that constraint builds abundance. Those are really my things to make sure that I do have time for all the
Yeah,
things that are important in this
yeah,
life and be a better leader here and now for my team.
yeah. Before I go to my next question, I wanna know as a founder, and having built everything, how what would you say, and I think I know the answer, but your identity, right, has evolved as it should, as all of ours do. But your identity is very closely connected to the work you do, as is mine, and it will always be, and I'm accepted that, and I love it, right? Because I wanna make sure on a Sunday night, I don't dread going to work on a Monday, right? And that has meant the world to me. I was like, build a place that I wanna go and show up, and hopefully some other cool, really amazing humans wanna do some similar work with me, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to identity, how do you see yourself in that role as a founder, as an executive director, as a mom, as all these things? What does identity mean to you these days?
You know, I think that, like you said, there's so much of the organization's values, right, that are really my values. I think I've thought a lot about Brene Brown says you should have two personal values. So I picked
Yes.
two,
Oh,
and for me,
oh,
it's really making a difference and, creating joy for myself and others. So those are my two. Those are sort of like my North Stars when I think about like what do I want to be and do. And our organization, we use a metaphor here. We talk about how our young people are seedlings, right? Full of potential, growing into tall trees who become our science leaders. And, you know, I, I, I took inventory when I kind of met the 20-year mark in the organization. I said, what do I want to do and be for the rest, for the next 20 years, right? And I was
yeah.
like, I want to work around people that I love and respect. Check, right? It's happening. And I want to make sure that there's more trees, right? Way more trees, growing more forests. And I think when I think about my identity as it relates to the organizations, one of the things I've said is like, I might be the roots, but I won't always be the wings. So I definitely don't have any kind of I'm sure I have blind spots about founder syndrome, but I don't tend to be the like person that wants to hold on tight to where the organization, goes. There are certain things that are really important to me, and I've worked really hard to build those systems and values in place and in the embedding them into the institutional fabric of the organization. But in terms of leadership, that is not, that is all here and it is all coming, right? Even more so.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. So your two values are so making, you said, making a difference. And then what was the other one you said?
Creating joy for myself and others.
Or for yourself.
Self and
That's
others,
brilliant.
yeah, but me too. So
Right,
if you look at
right.
our programs, like joy is a huge piece of our programs. We talked about this idea of, the ocean is really our platform for education. And it's not the end, it's the beginning, right? And so
Yeah.
so with the, but that's really around like again, sparking, young people's curiosity to want to learn more and really finding like, joy and belonging. And, that is something I do as a parent. My family's multiracial. My daughter is Black biracial. We're very immersed in building identity in lots of different ways, right? That are important to everyone. And so all of this, is where I really lean in. We're going to Cartagena, Colombia on Saturday as a family for
Wow.
vacation. Yeah. But it's again, really using that intentionality to like we literally go to one of our goals as a family is to every 2 years go to a place where Black communities are a majority and in power so that my daughter sees and feels that the world doesn't look like this, because I want her to know that at a very young age and have that visceral understanding, right? And she speaks fluent Spanish, so it's a great spot for us to go to. But again, just creating that, I do it everywhere in my life is how do we bring that to work? How do we bring that to my team? How do we bring it to the students here and what they experience, right? So making a difference and joy to me are just like they're together. So
It's amazing. That's
yeah.
amazing. If no one is giving you a high five for being what sounds like a really amazing mom, I'm giving you one right now. Like, that is awesome. That is so cool. Okay, so with saying all that, like, what would you say is something that keeps you up at night?
I always talk about like I think that it's all about people, right? Like I've never been a person who's, even when we're dealing with like last year and this year, right? Losing and probably next year, we've lost 20% of our funding due to government cuts, right? But those are the kinds of things that I feel like those are like really like rational problems you can solve, right? I think because everything in this organization is really all about serving people and by people, how do you make sure we inspire the next generation of science leaders? Well, it's our alums, it's our instructors, it's people inspiring people, right? So I think the thing that I think a lot about is like where we head as an organization. We have a plan we are now serving and engaging every young person in the City Heights community. So we call that
Amazing.
school shut. And we have achieved that. We are now reaching every young person in this community here at City Heights. And
Congrats.
thank you. Yeah. So our goal is, again, to stay here, to continue to be on the journey with every young person from kindergarten until their first job that's in this community. But our next journey is really to have this happen in new communities outside of San Diego, because, like you said, we don't want to be, we want to make sure the resources can sustain this, but not to grow and grow, where we outpace the resources that are here, right? Because we
Mm.
know ecologically that does not work, and populations will not thrive when you build beyond the resources. So we want to sort of cap that growth here and look to grow in other communities. And so when I talk about more trees in other communities, it's our next one will be in Hampton Roads. So yeah, so it's a long journey, just like doing the work we've done here. It's a long journey. We're not, again, when we're talking about persistence and staying the course, it's not about making this happen today, but it is about making this happen tomorrow. And so we've been building this, and then to see the same idea in multiple communities across the country in different locations. But what keeps me up at night about this is really making sure that we can um, build the right leadership, because I think that becomes really critical, not just here, but in these other sites. Leadership that both really understands deeply the work that we do here and why it works and the culture, but also represents and reflects, right, the community that it's in. And so I think that is a twofold approach that becomes very challenging.
Great segue into my next question. So, as you're just mentioning building your team and having the right players with you, how do you find and seek the right people and know when they're going to be a potential good fit for you? It sounds like obviously you want people to be value aligned with the work that you're doing and the culture that you've created. We get that a lot from people who are like, "Oh, I don't know if it's going to be the right fit for me going there." So, what are you doing? It seems like everything you do is intentional, which I appreciate so much. I know some folks, some of my team that my staff just adore and love. So you're obviously building really great teams and doing that. So how would you say if someone who's like out there listening to say, wow, it just sounds like an amazing organization, like what would I need to do in order to help show what someone's values are so that they align with a culture like yours so that they could, rise to the top in an interview type situation. So what do you do and how are you seeking those folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right. One is their values alignment, and you're looking for that, right? Not in just reciting the values, but in actually living the values. And so I guess I would just say that, like, do what showing how you've done what you say you will do, right? Like, really, this idea of integrity and living those values. And so, deeply immersing in community is so part of this organizations. When we are looking, for folks, we're looking for folks who have deeply immersed in community, um, have deep knowledge of community. I always talk about when you're looking for team members, I think it's really important to remember that some and it depends on the job, right? It depends on the role that's being filled, but some skill sets are not as obvious as other skill sets, right? So for
Mhm.
example, if I'm looking for somebody who is like our director of HR, yes, we really need to have like real content knowledge there, right?
100%.
You better come with
100%.
that. That is like it has to be also skill based, right? But then you look at other people who like bring, things that are a little more of that, um, you know, knowledge of this community of City Heights, right?
Mm.
One of my coworkers, Tony Figueroa, right? So he literally, I've known him since he was 9 years old, right? He was in this program when he was 9. I've known his
No.
Yes, I've known his grandma. I've known, for literally decades. He knows this community inside out. He has built community-based events in this community, right? He has been able to establish partnerships. He has been able to establish relationships. He has done all these things. Those are things, right? Whatever the job, like that you can bring into a role, right? That's something that is not something that just someone can like pull off a resume, right? Those are
Mm.
things that it takes time and, those relationships that he comes with, right? The knowledge of a community that he comes with, certainly like the lingual and cultural assets that he has, and can share, right? Those are things that I think become really, really important, as well as, right, skills, and really
Yeah.
making sure that we're looking to see those things.
Yeah, for sure. We teach a lot in our programs of, there's a lot of technical skills people need. And oftentimes you can learn that on the job, but it's the soft skills, like
Yeah.
you're just talking about Tony having done all these things. It's great integrated in who he is as being so connected to the community, which means so much for your organization to make sure that you are supporting and serving your organization and having those who represent your community in your organization. So kudos to you for that. I think that's a wonderful thing that you're doing when you're building this culture. I heard you earlier talking about your colleagues, and I love that. You're not saying my staff, and you're not saying other terminology that I tend to hear. And it sounds like you're building family, right? Your daughter's drawing pictures behind you and you're integrated with everything, right? And so can you talk a little bit about the culture you're creating and have been creating that seems very family and knowing Tony since he was so little and here he is helping you, lead this organization. That I love, right? Sometimes we shy away from this world of creating a space of love, if you will, right? It's like you can't say the word love in the workplace. No, I love my staff. I love them and I trust them and they're family to me, right? And that I want to say is an okay thing. And so it seems like you're building a really neat culture as you bring on the right people, right? And they build trust with you and earn respect and love and adoration for one another, right? Because you're spending all these hours together. You're seeing magical work happen, and sometimes days are hard and some days are fun, but it's a mixture of that. And I think culture leads through these efforts. So tell us a little bit, like, how's the culture? What does that look like for you with your org?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think, I mean, again, culture is like the air we breathe, right? So, or I think about it from a science, like the cytoplasm in a cell, right? It's like it's everything, and it's interesting because, it's funny you use the word family, and I would say I want to make sure it's clear at this point, like what we're really striving for is like what I would call, not a dysfunctional family, right? And it's really interesting because I think we've had to really evolve and change over time. And I would say 2 years ago, it was like just post COVID and we had a lot of growth and a lot of like, building really quickly and growing really quickly. And oh boy, we had a what I would call a culture crisis, John. It was tough. It was really tough. And again, it's one of those things where you're like, and I remember even during it, I was like, this is so hard and horrendous. Hated every second of it, but I knew future Shara and future organization and future all it's like we're gonna come out the other side, it's gonna be good, but boy is this painful right now and in the moment, and it was. But it's so beautiful where we have come through, right? And to really understand that culture today. So today we call that our ocean discovery DNA. Um, what is really right our culture, and it's really comprised of three things, right? It's our values, it's our norms, and it's our, rituals and customs, right? And that's like imagine the DNA strands,
Yeah,
right? Those
yeah,
are those
yeah,
things, and
yeah.
and I think it's incredibly important. And when you said like, I really appreciate that you brought back the word love. I know I said that earlier about, love and respect. And it is absolutely true. I feel like we love learning is in our values and love of our children every single day is something that we have to bring to this workplace, right? And so if we don't start with loving each other, what are we doing, right? And, I look around this facility and I could genuinely say, I've got teaching fellows who are here. They're here for 10 months and they are aspiring educators who come into the organization to really contribute their skills and their passion to our children teaching every single day, in the field, in the labs. And then they will go on and they'll take all the skills that they've also built up here and bring them out right into teaching in the San Diego and beyond. And I look at them and I'm like, I don't know them as well, right? Because they're only here 10 months and we're also in very different jobs, right? But I'm like, I look at them, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I love them. I love who they are as human beings. I love what they've chosen to do by giving themselves to this organization to grow themselves in this organization. And so I think, really having that be fundamental to who we are and what we bring. Like I always think of myself as kind of like a warrior, but I'm like a love warrior, maybe.
I love
I think that's like my
that.
second. I feel like I was more of a warrior in my earlier days. And now I feel like I'm a love warrior in my second half, right?
I love
And
that.
really having that be the underpinning of like, we are fighting for justice and we're
Yeah.
doing it in this way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I hear the scientist in you. I hear data. I hear all these cool things. Um, as we pivot a little to be like, how do you know, how do you gauge the success of your organization? I'm imagining you use data and these stories, right? Sometimes, you know, we are storytellers by trade in the nonprofit sector, right? I'm sure you have amazing success stories of some of your students who you just think about all the time. So how do you use the data to help tell your story?
Yeah, it's a great question because we always use the model that I learned at a Bank of America training years ago. Data plus story plus call to action, right? I love that. Data plus story plus call to action. Like that's what, you want to be doing. Um, and yes, we are data people here, John. Yes, 100%. In fact, we're incredibly fortunate. We built a data sharing agreement with the San Diego Unified School District.
Awesome.
When we built the building, that was part of the collaboration that we built, and so we are literally able to know how our students are performing, not just here, but in school, right? Where achievement matters. So as an organization, what we measure is really belief, achievement, and leadership, right? So if we say believe, achieve, lead, is what we do is what we measure as an organization. And we've got to start with belief, right? Because you've got to first believe that science is something you can do and a science leader is someone you can be. Then you go on to achieve. Then you can go on to lead, right?
Wow.
So how do we measure that? Really, we are looking at things like how are young people, when we're measuring achievement, we're looking at how are young people performing you know, after our programs in the school in the school system, because it's not enough to just come here and learn things. It's got to be how does that translate into knowledge and how you apply it and are able to apply that in areas where performance matters, right? And then how does that provide a pathway instead of a blockade, right, or a barrier? How does that provide you with a pathway into things like college and career? So we actually do collect data on things like test scores, performance, GPA performance, college attendance, college graduation. You mentioned it earlier, science attaining careers in science fields. So we know, right, that our students achieve at far greater rates because of our programs. One of the exciting things we just learned this year is that if a student comes to our programs for 1 week of out of school camp, that they will actually increase their performance in mathematics by 10% on average. Yeah, in the school system. So that's huge. And that
That's
is, yeah,
huge.
huge, right? And so that's work we've just kind of dug into this
One
year.
week
Yeah,
can
in
do
1 week.
that?
Yeah. And what's interesting, John, is we did a big study beforehand, a big look at like what are, achievement programs out there doing and are there 1 week initiatives that are effective in increasing achievement? And as it turns out, they're not effective, right? Because they're focused on, you know, things like, learning skills, right? And so what we thought was if we look at it differently, because we know belief, right, is really where the work we do matters, right? Changing mindset. So we said, look, if we can do that, if we can focus on belief instead of on skills, will we see something different? And the answer was yes. By focusing on belief, we actually do see achievement, increase. So because of that, we see, again, test scores rising. We see, higher degrees of students going into college and into careers. So like among our ocean leaders, for example, you talked about it. We see, our students go into science related careers at, 60 times their peers across the country. So yeah.
Amazing. Do you have one favorite success story that you want to
Mm.
share with us?
I don't have one favorite, but I can share one
You have many, I'm
person I'm
sure.
like, but yeah, I mean, we were just talking about Mary Cozy, one of our graduates the other day. She is she went through our programs, and I know she always talks about, how she didn't see herself in science, right? Growing up in a community like City Heights, we don't have, we don't have adults, right? Role models and parents who are science in the science fields. And she was part of a program where she met a mentor who's actually on our board now, Barbara Calantis, who's, a Filipino woman in environmental consultant. And Mary met Barbara and they just, they clicked and she saw herself in Barbara. And so the crazy thing is she works for Barbara's company now. So she's now literally a biologist at Barbara's company and she comes back and she now mentors students in the same program where she met Barbara, right? So that's leadership. That's
Leadership.
leadership, right? Our alumni lead and mentor. And
Yeah.
that's a huge part of our success as an organization.
And also why representation matters,
Why
right?
representation matters.
She saw herself in a role that she could
Yeah.
potentially be in, and there she is
Yeah.
striving to do that same great work. That's
Exactly.
amazing.
And I think that's all pivotal to the model, right? We talk about how our young people grow up with science. And the thing that makes us different than other organizations is, while most organizations serve some kids some of the time, we work with all the young people in this community
Yes.
all of the time, right? And I think that's really important because those kind of things can't happen if you're not doing that, right? And so that is
Right.
the unique kind of value proposition that we can provide.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Again, thank you for what you're doing. This is so exciting and inspiring. I think people listening are, one, hopefully, maybe not learning for the first time what you're doing, but like excited to support. So, do you have, I mean, I always want to give a plug for some of the work that you're doing. Are there things coming up that, you know, are you looking for volunteers or obviously some donors, or how are you? Yeah, could community members maybe listening now engage with your amazing organization?
Yeah, there's absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity to share that because we need more people to be involved in the work that we do. That is a big need for our organization. And I think there's a lot of people in San Diego who don't even know what Ocean Discovery Institute is. And thank you for helping us to change that. But I'd say there are three great things that people could do right away. One is you mentioned volunteering. We have so many volunteer opportunities, but a great way to get started is we have a once a month, just like come one, come all, come out to the lab, do it. There's a tour. You get to meet our team. I'd love to meet you. Please introduce yourself if you're here. But it's a 1 day volunteer opportunity. It's right on our website. Click volunteer. You'll see it. That's a great way, I think, just to get started and what I call like dip a toe, right? To just learn a little bit more and us to get to know each other and us to know what your skills are. And the second one is we've got a big fundraiser coming up. It's called Splash. It's here at our building. It is very, much more accessible than a lot of fundraisers out there. We've got early bird tickets right now, $50 a ticket. So go on our website. You can get tickets right away. They go up to $100, but it's still, within the realm of hopefully we would love to have you join. That is a great fundraiser for you to join us. And then lastly, we have an amazing community we've worked on building since we had the loss of funding last year. We said, where's the lemon chiffon pie from these lemons? And so we've been working on building, we call it the 500 strong community. And it's really 500 people giving $50 a month. So
What?
we are working to build 500 strong people giving $50 a month.
Love
And this
that.
is this amazing community. And then once in the community, we invite folks out and we're really building real relationships and having fun together. And again, having that joy together in making a difference in what we're doing, because it is all of us. So I would love for anyone to be part of any one of those three things.
Awesome. And tell us give a plug for your website. Where can they go?
OceanDiscoveryInstitute.org. Please come and reach out. We would love to get to know you better.
I love that. And before we wrap up, I have one segment that we just love to do. So it's called Three Wishes. So now it's imagine there's a genie here in the room with us, and this genie is going to grant you three wishes, and they could be anything. So what would one of your wishes be? What would your first wish be?
I'm very like focused, as you might see in here. So I'm not going to go into the big world. I'm just going to go what we can do here, right? Um, one wish would be that we would have, the resources that we need to be able to bolster what we have here and really ensure its endurance and have something there to start for the expansion and the growth in other communities. That would be one.
Okay. What would your second wish be?
My second wish would be that my community to continue to have safety and opportunity here in City Heights.
Love that.
Safety, more opportunity.
I love that. And what would your third wish be?
My third wish might be for me,
Yeah,
just as a
I love
leader
that.
to, there's a lot of things I'm constantly working on, John, right? And I've gotten to do a lot of, everything from therapy to coaching to all the good stuff, but just, the way that I can just embody that like more and really learn from all of that. faster, better, more, right? Because it's a practice and it's a journey we're on. And so just the more that I'm able to embody what I'm learning and practicing, I think the better, the happier I am as a human, the better I am as a leader, the better I am as a friend, as a mother, a partner, all those things. So, yeah.
I love that. Well, first off, thank you so much for being here, Shara. Like, I'm one just elated and excited, and you have said so many wonderful things that I think our listeners who grateful to listening to us really care about, and you're striking so many chords that are really the things that matter. And I think your leadership shines through. You're truly your authentic self right here, and I appreciate that so much. And I can tell that's why Tony and your rest of your amazing team love working with you and are so driven to do the good work that you're doing, to see the data prove these amazing things, to increase math for 10% with just a week of camp. I love all that you're doing. And so thank you just so much. From the bottom of my heart, I really want to say thank you for what you're doing for your participants, and thank you for what you're doing for our communities, because we can see it, we feel it, and we're very, very grateful.
Well, thank you for lifting us all up and for, through the work that you do. And it's been so much fun. Literally forgot that we were doing an interview because it feels like a completely a conversation.
I love it. I love it so much. Well, I'll just say publicly on here on the record that this is the start to a great friendship that should have happened a very long time ago. And I'm appreciative of that so very much. So
And now's our
again,
moment.
just thank you for it. And one more plug for those listening. If they want to go to learn more about Ocean Discovery Institute, please take it away and tell them where to go.
OceanDiscoveryInstitute.org.
There we go. So again, thank you all for those listening. We're super excited that we were able to have this amazing conversation with Shara and learn all about Ocean Discovery Institute. Also, fun fact, Good for Others has a new nonprofit hub that was just hit the Apple Store, which is a really great place for those listening who have not heard. It is a one-stop shop for all donors, volunteers, and job seekers, where we're going to have the first ever free nonprofit job posting website for all nonprofits here locally in San Diego. We had one for a while, but now we have one again, a job board, and an events calendar. So all fundraising, so we can all know where we're booking things and where to go and what opportunities are available. And it is officially in the App Store as of this past week. Really excited to continue to build a place where nonprofit professionals can continue to go and support one another and learn from each other. You can visit app.goodforothers.org to learn more and connect. And thank you, Shara, so much for being here. For those listening, we're very excited for you to participate and hear this conversation. We hope you heard something today that inspires you to do good for others.